It's football and other F words, and we got a lot to get to because a lot of stuff happened since the last time we all three gathered. We've got all kinds of training camp notes. The first unofficial depth chart came out, which doesn't fucking matter. As you can tell, if you were tuned in, I put the Rock up as in the graphic for it. It doesn't matter. Talking about the Tennessee Titans depth chart because that's his catchphrase, Mike. You're not a wrestling guy, so you may not know that, but
I'm not.
We'd go around and tell people it doesn't matter. And that's right, the depth chart. Once again, here to remind you, unlike most of media, including Mike, I actually remember every single season where the Tennessee Titans depth chart doesn't matter. And once again, it comes out, the black and white names are in certain orders and people get into a frenzy or have some major takeaway. And in the end, it doesn't really matter. But we'll talk about it. We got Quandre Diggs, Sadiq Charles, D-Hop has been injured. We got the preseason game, and we got a cornerback preview to get to, which we saved the cornerback preview for last just because I knew that was the least amount of analysis necessary at this stage because that was the settled position group for a while now, and everybody's kind of analyzed this as like, we're going to have the preseason game. We're probably going to have some other stuff. So I figured, why not? Just go ahead and get that all situated. Bluegrass Beverages is our sponsor. They're the reason that we are here together, bringing you the best Tennessee Titans analysis, one of the best podcasts for Tavondre Sweat propaganda that is being fulfilled. The Sweat prophecy is being fulfilled. And
as is the Wiley prophecy.
Yeah. What will keep you from sweating in the summer, though, is some cold beverages from Bluegrass Beverages. So head over to Hendersonville. Been around for over 50 years. That means you know they're damn good at their job, just like us, just like Brian Callahan, just like Josh Wiley. Damn good at their job. So head over to Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Join the best of Bluegrass mailing list so you can get exclusive insider info on tons of new liquor coming down the pipe, maybe new items in the beer and all that kind of stuff, and even events that are coming around the horizon. So make sure Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Boys, let's just start off the top. Mike has an article over at podkarski.com talking about Quandre Diggs. We have talked about Quandre Diggs before. Other than that, hey, Quandre Diggs is a Titan. He had a good little press conference. He likes the cut of Denard Wilson's jib. Stoney, I'll start with you since Mike wrote a whole ass article on it. It's probably got Quandre fatigue. What are your thoughts on the Quandre Diggs signing?
Well, first of all, I have not had a chance to read Mike's article, but I can't wait to prop my feet up after work today with a nice glass of Chardonnay, maybe a pretzel or two, and just really dig into that, savor the moment, because I am stoked that Quandre Diggs is a Tennessee Titan. I did a film study on Jamal Adams a few weeks ago for Stacking the Inbox. And my big takeaway from that piece was, hey, can the Titans just go ahead and sign Quandre Diggs too while they're at it? And now here we are a few weeks later. He's a Tennessee Titan. I think he still has plenty of juice left in the tank. I don't know. I mean, it seems like the issue with the safety market was just the asking price for a lot of these guys. And I know Justin Simmons is still out there, if I'm not mistaken, unless he's been scooped up. I've been kind of out of pocket this morning, but I think
in New Orleans today, working out or trying out, one of the two, but
yeah,
looking like that might happen.
So I felt like
Diggs, he's not going the Colts because Destin Adams of A to Z Sports said he was going. He pretty much put out a big statement acting like he was going to the Colts.
Yeah,
and they were big players, and we know how that turns out if you remember the whole Jerry Sneed situation.
So I feel like this does add some more juice to the safety room. I'm not going to go as far as Mike to say that he's the best safety on the roster now, but I do like Diggs quite a bit. I think it gives them four guys really that they can rotate in pretty much every situation. And I feel like he plays with the mindset that Denard Wilson seems to like. And I think he still has a little bit more range than maybe the Jamal Adams. I think there were a lot of people that were low on that signing because of the range of Adams. But I think Diggs makes up for that. The thing that I'm curious about is I'm really high on Elijah Molden, and I'm really curious, given the urgency with which the Titans have attacked the safety position in like the last month, like how do they view Elijah Molden and what does this say about him? But Otherwise, man, this is the secondary that just keeps getting better and better.
Well, Mike, obviously Quandre Diggs' job to lose, I guess to say. I mean, obviously he is now the penciled-in starter. We all assume that he will be the guy that on the next depth chart that doesn't matter will be the guy next to Amani Hooker's name. But I mean, it is possible Elijah Molden can still make some moves on this roster. Are we trending toward just a 4 safety set? We're just gonna play 4 safeties at this point, and 3 cornerbacks. So that gives us 7, and then 1 linebacker and Kenneth Murray, and then the rest is the defensive line. I mean, kind of seems like you could easily do that and still field a pretty good defense. As crazy as that sounds.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're headed towards is we're going to see a lot of 3 safety looks with this defense. It's not going to be like every down or anything like that, but I think the Ravens ran the 3rd most 3 safety sets in the NFL last year. Obviously, Denard Wilson was there in charge of the defensive backs, all that. Part of that is just because Kyle Hamilton is a freak, and they figured out that they want him closer to the line of scrimmage in the slot to where he can make more plays both in the run game and the pass game. But so the Titans don't have Kyle Hamilton, obviously. None of these guys are Kyle Hamilton. But I think the usage, most of the NFL is headed more towards using more 3 safety stuff as teams continue to try to confront how you deal with teams that are, spreading you out, using 3 wide receivers, really kind of trying to get your non-athletes in space if you put them on the field. Jack Gibbons. But I think we're going to see more 3 safety stuff. I don't think it's going to be base defense or anything, but I mean, it's probably going to be maybe close to 30%, a third of snaps, roughly. I could see having 3 safeties on the field. It'll be interesting to see how they deploy those guys, who's going to be down in the slot. I think Hooker has done that to a good degree. He's really been all over the place since joining the Titans. They've used him in the box. They've used him over the top. They've used him in the slot. He obviously played the slot or the star position at Iowa, which is kind of what made him an NFL prospect. But the funny thing is the other guys on this roster have too. Obviously, we know Molden's background comes from that star position too at Washington. And then he played slot here initially before moving to safety. Quandre Diggs is in the same boat. He started his career. He was an outside corner for Texas when he played in college, moved inside for the Lions where he, crossed paths with Brian Callahan. And then eventually got moved into safety where he really became a star and found his home. So
you're giving away your whole article here verbally. I mean,
no, it's got a lot more. It's got a lot more good information.
Are you just reading the article that you wrote?
Yeah, I've got a lot more good information on the snaps, how these guys are deployed, things like that in there that you'll want to go check out. But I think my point is, I think you're going to see more 3 safety looks. I think it's going to be very interesting to see who gets the slot role out of that group, because I think, Jamal Adams also could be in the mix there too for 12 personnel.
I have a question about this 3 safety thing because, I mean, obviously, like you said, Baltimore played a lot of 3 safety, but they also had a corner issue as well. Yeah. The Tennessee Titans do not have a corner issue. So, and I over at secondinbox.com, I have the dime packages where it's 6 defensive backs. So when you're talking about 3 safeties for Baltimore, they only had 6 defensive backs at 1%, which was 29th in the NFL for dime packages. So in this scenario, are you saying that maybe we'll see more dime, or are you saying that, okay, we're probably going to see nickel? And if you see nickel, who's coming out? Roger McCreary or Cheeto?
I would say Cheeto is my guess. And I think I've mentioned this before. I think McCreary is the second best corner on the roster pretty comfortably ahead of Cheeto.
Even on the outside?
Yes. Yeah. He's not that bad on the outside. I mean, I think he's better on the inside, but it's not a huge difference when he plays outside. He's still a sticky cover guy. And I think he was better last year than – I think he's one of the guys that kind of has flown under the radar here because all of the new additions in this
I would say
position
no
group?
because that's like the 15th time I've heard
Well,
the media say he's flown
but
under
that's
the
the
radar.
only
He can't
time
fly under the radar anymore.
but he was probably the best guy out of the second year players in that whole draft class, that big draft class that they had in 2021. He was probably the best guy as far as making a big step forward. I mean, the bar was low because he's compared to like Treylon Burks and Nicholas Petit-Frere and Malik Willis and all these other guys. But McCreary made a big step forward, and I think he's set up to be a really good player for them and an impactful player for them. So I don't think he's coming off the field. I think it would be Cheeto in those situations, who's also the oldest of the group and could probably, his legs might be able to use the most breaks in there. But it's going to be really interesting to see how they use these guys. They've got a good problem with some depth and some different looks that they can throw out there, because I think all these guys are a little bit different in how they play and stylistically and all that. But I'm surprised that do you have Quandre Diggs ahead or behind Matthew Jackson right now in your safety?
Barely ahead right now.
Yeah.
I have Quandre Diggs behind Elisha Molden, but I will unwaver in that opinion.
That is a crazy opinion.
It will be proven wrong.
It's a crazy opinion.
That opinion. I'm not going to just change my opinion at this point in time. Stoney, I want to ask you this question because we're talking about Quandre Diggs. We'll talk about other defenders that maybe have been lost, like All-Pro Garrett Wallow, and his Pro Bowl replacement, JoJo Doman, also went down with injury today. But how will teams attack this defense? Is this just going to be – it seems like this defense kind of has everything covered that you could really want, because they can use the safeties more than they have to use the other linebackers behind Kenneth Murray. But if you're an offensive coordinator and you're talking to your head coach about how to attack this defense, what are you going to tell them to do?
Man, the way it's constructed,
and this
now,
comes from Ed Henry, by the way, on YouTube. I should throw
shout out Ed. Appreciate you, Ed. Yeah, I don't have a hat on today because I got my hair back, so it's in a bun on the back. No hat Wednesday. If I'm looking at the bones of this defense, I think it is built from a personnel standpoint, and from what we've kind of gathered from studying Denard Wilson, his previous stops along the way, I think there's going to be a focus on interior pressure with Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat. I think they've gotten a myriad of bodies at the second level that they're just going to blitz with and make quarterbacks think, okay, who's coming from where on this play? And I think they're going to rely on their outside corners to cap the deep stuff. And the idea being, like, if we can just slow down the processing of opposing quarterbacks, we can stifle the offense, we can make them uncomfortable, we can get to them, push the unit back. So I think if I'm an offensive coordinator looking at how to counter that, I'm going to try and run the ball, and I'm going to try and run the ball at the perimeter and get around the tackles there, get into space, because, we think Kenneth Murray and Jack Gibbons are pretty reliable tacklers. Jack Gibbons, I feel like, is a pretty good run defender. But at the same time, if you can shake those guys, you're going to be running against these three safeties. And as aggressive as they are, it should theoretically be a strength matchup for the offense. But I don't know. I don't know if you guys would add anything to it, but that to me looks like the clear weakness right now because of the defense's lack of depth at edge. I think if I'm wanting to kind of get into a rhythm as an offensive coordinator, I'm going to try and bounce some runs outside on this defensive front.
Mike, what are your thoughts? Because, obviously Arden Key will be gone, so the backup edge group, we don't really know what they are run defense-wise, except for maybe Rashad Weaver. But we also don't know how this defense prefers to set the edges and how it has coached these guys to do that. So what are your thoughts? Is it running the football? Is this like the antithesis, bizarro Tennessee Titans, Mike Vrabel era, where you don't run the football against the Tennessee Titans, Mike Vrabel, but this is where you do that. You do it here against Denard Wilson.
Yeah, I think my first thought is still to go attack the middle of the field in coverage, because Diggs helps, giving you a little bit of a guy with some range back there, and taking, he's not super fast, but he's got good range because he's honestly a little bit stylistically like Kevin Byard in the fact that he's really good instinctually, knows how to diagnose plays and be there on time, regardless of foot speeds. But I will say this, I still think the weakness is the coverage in the linebacker group, and in the middle of the field generally. So that would be my first guess. Would be I'd go after the middle of the field. I'd attack them. I'd stay away from L'Jarius Sneed. I would test Cheeto a little bit, and then I would run it at whoever's playing opposite Harold Landry mercilessly until they figure out how to deal with that. Because I think Rashad Weaver, whoever's playing over there, I don't think it's going to be. That's probably going to be the worst player on the field when they take the opening snaps in week 1 would be my guess. But I will say this: run the football against this team. If T'Vondre Sweat is what he appears to be,
that's why you got to go outside.
It's going to, but I mean, even if you go outside, when you have that kind of disruption happening in the middle of the defense, your linebackers are flowing downhill. I mean, like Kenneth Murray. Even if it takes him, an extra second to diagnose the play, he's going to have clear runways all day, baby. No guards up climbing up on Kenneth Murray's front porch. So I think it's going to be really hard to run the football against this team if those 2 defensive tackles are what they appear to be.
We haven't seen them play, and we don't know if this is something like last year where the defense is showing up and the offense just isn't good enough, or if this is maybe just strength on strength or whatever, as far as these training camp battles go. But even with the Quandre Diggs signing, it just seems, because I think it took a little bit longer for us to adjust our mindset with how to view the personnel and the deployment of this defense. Like, I think it was really easy for us to see how, okay, no Mike Vrabel, here's Brian Callahan, here's the offense, here's what's going to happen on the offense. And we all have been enamored with all this new shiny toys, the new way of doing things at the Tennessee Titans. And I kind of talked about this last week because Easton kind of asked us a question in the group chat, and I go, I just don't think that people realize yet, or maybe they're just now starting to realize these last 2 weeks, that this team is going to be blitzing way more. And so maybe the deficiencies that we viewed at the start of the offseason aren't really the level of deficiency that they are in actuality. And with the signing of Quandre Diggs, here's another chess piece that provides, again, you to move around and add other chess pieces. Like Quandre Diggs allows Elijah Molden to be what we all kind of view him as, which is a dime, kind of guy, linebacker up close, running with some tight ends here and there. This allows Jamal Adams to be maybe the blitzer that he's supposed to be as well. Like, it just allows everybody else to do things. And like, I joke about that. Maybe we just have one inside linebacker out there in Kenneth Murray, but I don't think that's really out of the realm of possibility with this defense, with the way they've glowingly talked about Kenneth Murray, with the way that Kenneth Murray has become a leader, has been vocal, is getting people in and out of their lineups. And if you were talking about putting right now the best 11 players on defense, Jack Gibbons is now probably 13th or 14th. So, and he's your linebacker too. And I think that's a good thing. Like, I don't think I'm not as worried as the linebackers as the year goes on, as the offseason goes on. I'm not as worried about the linebackers right now, but doesn't mean that they're not going to be an issue. It's just like, because if Kenneth Murray goes down, then you're kind of fucked. But like, it's just, I think that if you're talking about starting 11 or starting 12, if you include like a Roger McCreary or Cheeto, on the outside of that, your top 12 players on this defense are actually sounding like they're pretty damn good. And I think this defense is going to be just really good. And I'm not saying I'm betting on it or anything, or I'm not saying they're going to be elite, but I think we're going to see a stark difference with how this defense is deployed. And I think that it's just going to be one of those things where it may take a week or two for fans to understand that this defense is just going to be totally different than, and I think that's safe to say, right, Mike?
Yeah, I think it is going to be very different schematically. And I do think it's going to be blitz heavy. That's where they're going to try to get their pressure, is going to be supplementing the guys that they have in that room with, pulling guys off the second level to get in there. And I do think it'll be interesting, because I do think there's Jamal Adams, and I was critical, obviously, of the signing when it happened, because I thought that was going to be their safety answer, right? Now that I know he is really like the part B to Diggs's part A of the safety answer. I feel a lot better about it, to the point where, like, I mean, and look, he's already hurt and not practicing.
Just
So,
sore.
well, I mean,
He's
we're
old,
already
man. They're load managing him. Don't
okay.
overreact.
All right. Well, I mean, for a guy that's missed like 70% of his games over the last 3 years, you'd prefer to see him practice more. It's different than Snead, right? Because Snead is always plays.
If
But
he had an
yeah,
actual injury and not sore, I'd be a little bit different.
yeah. All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see on Jamal Adams, the injury stuff. I still worry about that, but I like the fit a lot better now, because I do think there's some credence to the idea that, like, you could go big dime on third downs and have Jamal Adams in there as your second linebacker next to Kenneth Murray, which I really think is where we're probably going. And you've got a lot of speed on the field. You've got two guys that, if you're playing against a mobile QB who can hurt you on third downs with his legs, you got two guys who can hawk a mobile quarterback down in Murray and Adams. And I think he's a liability in coverage for a safety, but for a linebacker, not a problem, right? Like, I think he's probably still pretty good for a linebacker in coverage. So I think if that's where we're headed, I'm very interested in that grouping and that setup. So I think they've got a lot of interesting packages they could put together. I think this defense has a chance to be really multiple. I definitely still want to see it come together, because I think one of the things is it's a lot of new pieces, new play color, all that stuff. But then, like, the depth is also like paper thin. So, we're like one or two injuries away from this being a really bad situation at multiple positions. So I think if the starters can stay healthy, I think this does have a chance to be a pretty good defense, though.
Stoney, let's talk about the fat people on the other side of the ball in the offense. Sadiq Charles, for personal reasons, has retired and left the team. And Brian Callahan said that they were splitting reps with the ones, but he only started getting him and Dylan Radins, but Dylan Radins only started getting real reps with the ones that were considered like anything after he was missing practice. Sadiq Charles was missing practice. So I thought that was a little of a weird fibberoo, if you will, to pump up Radins, I guess. I don't know. Radins is very sensitive. So it turns out that today, day one, even though Brunskill will be part of the guard competition like he was at the beginning of the year, where he was actually getting the second most reps at right guard behind Sadiq Charles, it looks like today it was mainly Radins versus Rupsich. And we talk about Sadiq Charles, and we're talking about this scheme, and we think this scheme is going to be lean a little bit more gap oriented. That's based off Bill Callahan's tenure at Cleveland and the last 2 years with the Cincinnati Bengals. We don't know that for sure, but that's what we're assuming at this point, which feels like a safe assumption.
Somebody's got to ask that
in that regard, Brunskill and Radins don't really fit that. Neither of them really fit that mold. I don't know really much about Rupsich to say one way or the other. But as far as physicality in games at the point of attack, I think Brunskill's a lot more physical, a lot more tenacious, and has a little bit more play strength. But Radins is more athletic and has the more, I guess, and he's added muscle and stuff. So we don't know really how much stronger than he is. But Radins seems like the other guy. But we've seen Radins at guard and we've seen Brunskill at guard. And Brunskill clearly was better, but this is a different scheme. So in your mind, out of these three guys, where do you lean? Is it going to be, do you think it's Radins' job automatically and it's his job to lose? Or do you think that maybe there is a real competition here between Brunskill and the recently added Rupsich?
Yeah, so I think you're spot on with your analysis, the difference between the two. I think Radins is probably more athletic, but Brunskill has some dog in him. I mean, I'm not the biggest Brunskill fan. I don't think he's, a necessity for this offensive line, but I do acknowledge he probably was their best offensive line last season. And I think he's fully capable of getting in there and playing if need be. But I do think there is an element of power that's missing from his game. And I think there's a reason that they've moved him over to center where he's backing up Lloyd Cushenberry. I think that's what they see him as. And moving to right guard, I would venture a guess, is not going to be something they do unless they absolutely have to. The love for Charles, at least for my end, was from watching the Washington tape a season ago and thinking, oh, wait a second. This guy is not as bad as the larger group would indicate. I think Titans fans would be fully sympathetic watching the Washington Commanders offensive line from 2023. It was awful. And you can make a strong argument it might have been worse than the Titans offensive line. But I rarely saw Charles like missing assignments. The technique was good. There were plenty of situations in the tape that I watched anyway, where he would be holding his block one-on-one and there's just full chaos completely around him. So you look at the sturdy frame, the powerful hands. He's athletic enough to pull and get into space. I don't think he's the most athletic, but I think if we're to assume that they are going to be running more power, more gap stuff, I think he was the natural fit because of the power. So I think you're asking Radens to kind of step up and play a version of his game that we haven't necessarily seen him play before. Now, that could be because under Vrabel and Todd Downing and Tim Kelly, there was more zone runs, which is predicated more on athleticism. Maybe we just haven't seen it yet. But I think there was a reason that Charles was getting most of the first team looks, which from what you and I have heard, Zach, I don't know about you, Mike, but it's been pretty consistently Charles running with the first team throughout the spring and the summer. So I'm with you. I don't know where this splitting reps conversation came from, but I think that's the differentiator between the two. And for me, that's what Radens has to step up and prove before I'm willing to just lock him in at that spot.
Are we going to get an Andrew Rupsich Film Friday?
Hey, maybe we could. I don't know. I might have to go back to his college tape because I don't think I have the preseason all 22. But listen,
he
I like Rupsich
last year, I believe. And
did he?
Yeah.
Maybe
late in the season. I want to say Seattle, maybe. And
God,
maybe one other. It was in those realm of games where it was just really ugly there down the stretch.
I don't want to watch that Seattle game again, man. That's just everybody playing their backups and third stringers just running the ball 80 times on each side. Oh my God, awful game. But I think
you need to say a few words about the end of Ojukwu Mania.
It's not over yet. Who said it's over?
Not over yet. Okay.
We're gonna move Ojukwu Mania to right guard. Now, why can't
Mike has left the Ojukwu train because of body shaming, by the way, his pencil thin legs. So Mike is a body shamer, and it's very embarrassing for him. Mike,
I'm telling you,
what's your faith in Dylan Radens? I mean, like, let's be honest here. I know that everybody loves to guzzle and glaze and loves them some Dylan Radens.
Excuse me. Oh, no.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Guzzling glaze
at
now.
At the end of the day, I understand that he was a good right tackle, but he has been a better tackle than guard. And listen, I'm willing to let bygones be bygones and put faith in Bill Callahan and that he can maybe turn Dylan Radens into something he has yet to be, which is a power kind of player with a nasty mean streak. But what is your faith that Dylan Radens, you can change a whole man's personality? Because I'd tell you, my wife would tell you that you can't change shit about men and their personality. So I'm the same person I've always been. So Mike, can Bill Callahan do what my wife can't and change an entire person's personality?
I don't think he can change personalities. No. And I think the fact that Sadiq Charles retires and immediately they're like, oh, we got to try Rupsich in here, tells you what you need to know about how they view Radens. Like, if it was really just like hey, we like Charles, we like Radens, like one of those two guys is going to get it, and Charles dropped out, they would just say, okay, Radens is going to be the right guard. Congrats, buddy. Let's go. The fact that they're trying anybody to take this spot, please, from Radens, I think tells you a lot.
I love that. That's how you view it. I'm actually a little surprised, but I love that's how you view it.
To me, Radens, he's everyone's favorite bad offensive lineman, right? Like, there's like just enough there for people to like wrap a narrative around to tell themselves the story that, like, you know what, he's not actually bad. He just hasn't been given the right shot. And there's just enough there. So like everybody's got this idea that he's secretly good, and it was Mike Vrabel's fault and Keith Carter's fault and Jason Hotelling's fault and everyone else's fault, but Radens was really the guy all along. And I just don't think I buy that. If Bill Callahan, the offensive line guru to end all offensive line gurus, is sitting here telling me I need to see more Andrew Robson.
Which he got they split reps today, which is mind-boggling to me, by the way, that immediately Dylan Radins has to split reps with Andrew Rupsich.
That tells me a lot. And look, I've said my piece on the Brunskill thing. It is a stylistic problem with this offense. They need guys who can create vertical displacement in the run game. He cannot. That is not in his bag.
But isn't that the same whatsoever. Thing you say about Dylan Radins? Like that's one of
Radins has more pop than Brunskill does. Brunskill is purely a get in the way blocker, which is okay, and he's good at that, and he's made a fine career out of that. I mean, he's been around for 8 years or whatever. That's way longer than most guys last, especially guys that basically came from nothing like he did. So, congrats to him on that. But I just don't think he fits what they want. And if he did, again, he'd be in there getting reps too. I think the way that they hand out these reps is telling about how they view these guys. And, and a lot of people keep asking, like, is there a free agent on the street that could come in here? No. Like the free agents on the street are like Tyree Phillips and like all these other guys that are cast-offs of bad offensive lines. I mean, these are not going to be upgrades. They're going to be the same level as your Dylan Radins, as your Andrew Rupsich, maybe worse. So I just think it's unlikely. The one guy was Connor Williams, who signed with the Seahawks yesterday, and he's gone now. You really
jinxed that one, didn't you?
Well, I knew it was he was already in discussions with them, and I think somebody else, it might have been the Dolphins, about coming back there. But I knew he was already talking to them, so I figured it was a long shot. But that was the one guy that would have been a potential difference maker for them in this spot.
I wonder if they'll call back the kid from Liberty that they cut earlier this summer,
Xavier Gladlin that they
had
at
Gadlin.
Yeah.
Gadlin. Well, just to give everybody some stats on future right guard All-Pro Andrew Rupsich.
Here we go.
Comes to you from Culver Stockton University, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's community college. I'm not entirely sure. Last year, he played 130 pass blocking snaps. He allowed 1 sack, 1 hit, and 3 hurries for 5 total pressures. So not a total disaster. And if you
who's on Culver Stockton's schedule, though?
Oh, I don't know. This is last year with the
Tennessee. Oh, it was last year. Okay.
I'm just saying that he's from Culver Stockton.
I thought you were saying like Colorado School for the Mines or something like that.
This is from last year with the Tennessee Titans. So not terrible. He did it for those of you that love your PFF grades. Remember, 60 is average, so anything above 60 is above average. His last 3 games versus Seattle, Houston, and Jacksonville, he posted a 77.4, 66.5, and 80.2. So in pass blocking grades. So his run blocking is where the issue lies, but you can always teach run blocking. You can't teach pass blocking. That's
right.
Everybody says get you a pass blocker and worry about run blocking later. So, I'm with you, Mike. The fact that they ended up putting Rupsich like right there at like 50-50 split. I'm with you. I think it says a lot more about Radins than what people want to believe. And John Gall is right. We need to remember this, that Dylan Radins did block the 49ers line 1 versus 5. He took on 5 rushers at once and held them all off and allowed, negative sacks. They actually took sacks away from the San Francisco 49ers in other games because of Dylan Radins. So everybody needs to remember that. Thank you, John Gall, for reminding us that. DeAndre Hopkins got injured. Everybody kind of makes it sound like it's not that big of a deal on the Titans side of things as far as like his recovery time and stuff. I've seen a few players say it's not going to be that big of a deal. So, I mean, as long as he's there week 1, you're fine. Week 2, you're fine, right? Like, I mean, if it gets to week 3, week 4, then you're kind of like, what the fuck was happening here? But I think at the end of the day, for a guy that takes care of his body, I'd be very surprised if he's not there by week 1. Obviously, this allows Treylon Burks to maybe get some more reps in, to be used a little bit more, to get comfortable a little bit more. Same with NWI, obviously. Any real comments on the D-Hop injury? I'll start with you, Stoney, then we'll go to Mike.
No, I'm not going to be worried about it until everybody else seems worried about it. Then I'll read the room and adjust accordingly. But for now, I think it could potentially be a good thing for camp. I mean, you'd rather it be Hopkins than Ridley or somebody else, because Hopkins does already have the experience with Levis. They do have a built-in chemistry. And I think it could be good for guys like the inevitable NWI getting some reps in there in that role, maybe Treylon Burks season expanded role. I'm just not ready to jump off the bridge yet.
Okay. Mike?
I'm also staying affixed to the bridge. There's just no need to be that worried about it. He may not even miss a game. I mean, he doesn't need any practice. We're good on Hopkins practice. Get ready for the regular season, big boy.
All right. The Tennessee Titans unofficial depth chart came out, and I don't see any really big surprises or anything if you've been paying close attention to camp. Obviously Chig and Josh Wiley are sharing the spot because you never know what they're going to call on the first play. So obviously, your starter kind of, changes up from there. Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, your 1 and your 2. At running back, again, sharing the same one spot because you never know what kind of play call they're going to call at the beginning of the play, so you never know who's really going to start. So nothing really big. I found nothing of real note in this, just because the punt returner situation remains unsettled. So, of course, Mason Kinsey at some point was going to be punt returner 1 going into a preseason game. Other than that, I mean, just kind of the same stuff. Because I expect that Treylon Burks at some point will be listed as a kickoff returner at some point during the preseason as well. I find it really hard to have any sweeping takeaways from this depth chart, because as we all know, this thing is going to change fairly quickly. This came out the same day Garrett Wallow went down with injury, and he was still listed as, linebacker 2, and he's already, been ruled out. JoJo Doman, who is behind him, JoJo Doman was behind Otis Reese and Luke Gifford and Cedric Gray and James Williams. And he was, I think linebacker 2 with the 1s today in place of Garrett Wallow. So he just jumped all of a sudden up the depth chart. So I just have a hard time having a real takeaway from it. And then that's just going to be my take every year, because I just feel like it's fun. It's fun to look at a depth chart and just kind of peek around and look at some things. But I just, no big surprises. I mean, Mike, defend your depth chart.
I mean, you say it's meaningless, but it's not totally meaningless. They're putting them in some order. I mean, it's not like they randomly put that thing together. I think it's
not if you listen to a lot of head coaches. A lot of head coaches say they put it just a random order.
I think that's just so that they don't want us reading into every little thing, which I get. It is true. It is fluid. It is camp. All these guys can move up and down. It's competition. That's what it's for, right? None of this. Nobody should look at this and say, all right, well, that's the starting lineup for week 1. Let's go, right? It's the starting lineup if a game was to be played today, though, which I do think is notable. It kind of gives you a snapshot in time where these guys are stacking up. And I think it's interesting that they did.
Let me ask you a question, because as you're talking about that,
yeah,
let's say that they started a game today and the final 53 was cut. Do you really think that all these rookies are not going to make the team?
I think there's a chance some of them don't make the team.
I didn't think so, but look, I mean, pretty much all of them but 3 wouldn't make the team.
But this doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to cut guys in this order either, right? Some guys you are stashing on the roster because you see long-term upside, but for right now, if you were to play a game today, again, you aren't playing them because they're not ready, right? I think Cedric Gray. I think guys, I mean, you don't see Jarvis Brownlee buried on the depth chart, right? He's ahead of veteran guys. So I think it does say something about where they view Cedric Gray right now. For example, like he's behind
veteran
Vance
guys that
Campbell.
he's ahead of Caleb Farley, Anthony Kendall, and Tay Gowan. Really hard group. To
Okay,
really
but Chance Campbell. I mean, are we saying Chance Campbell some behemoth?
I'm not.
Of course.
I'm just saying that I think that all these linebackers, like I don't think today, like if you asked me a couple days ago when this came out, who's going to make the team if they were to cut everybody, I would say that even if you give that to me, you say, look at this depth chart. Tomorrow they're going to cut a bunch of people. Who you think they're going to cut? I'm telling you, they're going to cut Garrett Wallow and JoJo Doman and other guys because they're going to make room for Cedric Gray and James Williams. Like, I mean, that's just, I think that's the way I view it. Is like, I get what you're saying, but I think they just kind of want to throw people out there and just, we'll see what we see.
I think it's meaningful because otherwise you don't make a decision like placing Jarvis Brownlee on the second team, but not Cedric Gray, right? Because Cedric Gray was a higher draft choice. He's got just as bad a competition. I mean, Chance Campbell is not like someone that they had to put ahead of Cedric Gray. So I just think it tells you a little bit about how they're viewed right now. And of course that can change. I think it is interesting that they did the split starters for Chig Okonkwo and Josh Wiley, but not for Sadiq Charles and Radens, which again tells me they don't like Radens. They don't like him. So, and they go ahead and throw Sweat in there as the starting nose tackle. I mean, obviously we expected that. We think that's reality, but they just go ahead and put him in there, which I'm not sure Vrabel would have done, by the way.
Well, he has done it before. I mean, he did it with Peter Skoronski last year.
With the first round pick, but with the second round pick, I'm not
make
quite.
Me start Googling first unofficial depth chart under the Vrabel era.
No, we don't have to get into all that. But I think it's interesting. I do think Mason Kinsey, for example, being listed as the top punt returner is notable because that is his ticket to the roster. Someone is going to make the roster as a punt returner. And I don't think they're going to probably keep two out of that. And we've talked about this for forever. Kinsey, Kyrus Jackson, Jaquan Jackson, and Phillips. That group of four right there, you need to be the punt returner if you want to make the roster. Now, I think Phillips may have a slight chance to like convince them to keep 7 wide receivers, even though I don't think that's likely. But I think you need to win that job if you're going to make the roster. And if Kinsey has a chance to win the punt return job, which at the very least, this is suggesting he has a chance at it. I think he has a chance.
Maybe they just want to get it out of the way and be like, okay, now we can finally move on from Mason Kinsey.
He's a cockroach. You can't kill him. He's going to be here in 30 years. Him and then Dylan Radens will also be here, as I joked in the slide.
I'm rooting for Bryce Oliver to be the guy that overtakes the Mason Kinsey irrational love spot on the practice squad because Mason Kinsey's not making this roster.
I'm proud. Let me say this. I'm proud of Titans fans.
Not making this roster.
No, this does not suggest a guy that is 100% not making the roster.
Oh, he does. He's 100% not making this roster. Fully guarantee it. 100% not making this roster. I mean, you had Easton out there saying, "Oh well, with DeAndre Hopkins injured, maybe Mason Kinsey can make the roster." What? Wait, he doesn't even play the outside wide receiver position. Look, I am not buying in to the hype that is trying to be created about Mason Kinsey, just like I'm not buying into the hype that was tried to created by Malik Willis. And guess what? He fucking sucked today at stuff. Bad players are bad players. And so I am not buying into this hype of Mason Kinsey. And you guys are all going to look foolish.
Here's the difference.
He's going to be making the team.
Here's the difference. All those wide receivers are bad players. All those guys I just listed, the Kyle Phillips. Kyle Phillips is a training camp star only. So far.
No, he is good in the regular season. The problem with Kyle Phillips is not skill and not ability. It's staying healthy. So I just want to throw that out there. He's not a bad player.
And if he wants to be on the roster, he's going to need to be the punt returner.
Maybe he's actually being coached how to catch a punt for once because Craig Ackerman didn't fucking know how to do it.
Okay, so Kyle, you catch the ball. You don't just slap it with your hands and knock it on the ground. They're done. I coached him. Fixed it.
I think it would require a little bit more coaching than that. Stoney, do you have any takeaways other than are you with Mike on that Mason Kinsey is going to be an all-pro returner all of a sudden?
All-pro returner.
In the case of Jaquan Jackson, Cedric Gray, James Williams to a certain extent as well, part of me looks at this and wonders if this is Brian Callahan, the coaching staff's way of slapping it in their face. Hey, this is where we see you right now. in an effort to maybe motivate, to say, hey, you've got to come up and win this job because you're not there right now. So maybe it's not necessarily truly indicative. Like I can't imagine, I can't fathom a world we live in where this team is going to keep the Garrett Wallows and the JoJo Domans over the Cedric Grays and the James Williams. And I really exclude James Williams from this because we've heard he's been having pretty good practices lately. But with Cedric Gray, there's the disconnect there that it sounds like he's clearly not ready. And maybe it's a motivational tool to say, hey, this is where you've got to go to get to one of these spots. So I don't know how seriously they take it. I feel like it's one of those things you look at the depth chart and you're like, yeah, that makes sense, but this doesn't make sense. So I don't know. I don't know how seriously they're taking it. As for the tight end spot was the other thing I wanted to make note of. Josh Wiley and Chigakonkwo being split. I think Brian Callahan elaborated on that a little bit, specifying Wiley as a Y tight end and Chig is more of the F player. So I think within the confines of this offense, they might be looking at these two as like two separate players, like almost two separate positions, not wanting to put one ahead of the other because they're going to be utilized quite differently, to which I say 12 personnel hive, let's ride.
Easy on YouTube asks, this is a question for me and Stoney. Is Mason Kinsey the JD
Yes.
McDonough of this team? And to which I'd say, no, he's the Carlito of this team.
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
I don't even know what y'all are talking
Barely, yeah, you wouldn't know. Okay. Let's talk about one person in particular that's on the back of this list, but is having, for everything we have heard, a tremendous camp. We're hearing it from A to Z. We're hearing it from Teron Davenport. We're hearing it from Easton Freeze, Braden Gall, all these guys. Jalen Harrell. And Jalen Harrell, for those that may not be Stacking Inbox subscribers, was one of the top-rated Titans fit players, rookies at edge in this class. And I was really high on some Jalen Harrell. And Jalen Harrell seems to be trying to focus on like one thing every day to improve upon, and keeps on getting better and better, and keeps on working his way up into the teams, making plays, making sacks, making, all these things that you need from a player at a position where you don't have much. Look, I'm sure Shane Ray's a nice guy, but he hasn't played a regular season snap since 2018, 2019?
2018.
So I look at a guy, and we've probably have seen the best of Rashawn Weaver, but I'm willing to say that maybe he just fits the scheme better. I don't know. But when you're talking about a guy like Jalen Harrell and the potential, upcoming suspension of either 2 to 6 games, whatever it may be, for, different substance abuse, violations and all this stuff, whatever it may be, Arden Key's missing time. Can Jalen Harrell help mitigate that? Is this a guy where we're buying too much camp hype? Like, are you saying, where are you at on the meter? And I'll start with you, Mike. 1 to 10. 10, the hype is so real, and it's going to come to fruition 100%. Or 1, this hype, everybody needs to get a control of themselves. This is way worse than even the Mason Kinsey hype.
I mean, I'll say like, was it 10 was fake hype and 1 was real hype?
10 is good hype. I believe in the hype, and 1 is fake hype.
All right, I'll say I don't know, like a 6 or a 7. I kind of liked Harrell, and I mean, you don't get called like a leader of a defense that good and that talented at Michigan without having something to you. So I do think that there's something there, and I liked him as a pick when they took him. That said, I mean, the odds of him like coming in and being a difference maker right away, I think are super low. I think maybe he comes in and he's, able to, get by, help you get by, take some snaps, like make a few plays here and there, that kind of thing. But I don't think we're seeing like a phenomenon or anything like that rookie season. Cause I do think we're still talking about a guy that's going against, Nicholas Petit Freres and John Ojukwu and like all these guys, these not good tackles. And it's a lot easier to look good when you're going against worse competition. So it'll be interesting to see how he looks when they take on Seattle. Not that Seattle's loaded at the edge either, but it'll be interesting to see how he looks in preseason for sure. And then also, whenever they get the joint practices going and that kind of thing, that'll be good. That'll be good work for him.
Yeah, the Jalen Harrell one was against Leroy Watson, which was on the left side for
Excuse me,
John Gall's question.
I had it flipped over. Seattle actually does have good tackles, so he'll get better work against them.
I mean, we'll see. But Stoney, where are you at? Are you at a 6.5? Are you willing to go a little bit higher? Or are you going to go a little bit lower?
I'm at a 5. I'm like right in the middle. I want to see it happen. I was not as high on Harrell as you guys were, and it was strictly a tape matter. I didn't love the tape. I didn't particularly understand his usage at Michigan as well. I mean, they had 4 guys that they rotated pretty regularly. But seeing the measurables come out throughout the draft process, seeing Zach's Titans fit rating come out, thinking this could be a guy that could contribute, to now going through the summer. And this wasn't like a 1 or 2 practice thing, right? We've been hearing about Jalen Harrell pretty much from the start of this offseason. So I think by virtue of being the last man standing, there's the potential for him to be forced to contribute. I think the preseason is going to be of paramount importance for a guy like Harrell to get reps and simulated game action like that. I think he's going to be a name to watch, and I think he could develop into a pretty nice player for this team, but I'm not ready to make that leap just yet.
It's very hard to put your faith in a 7th round pick when you kind of look at it and you're like, why did everybody skip him that many times? Now, listen, there have been players that have came out to rush the passer in the 7th round, undrafted free agents, but it's just so rare. And it's just so rare that happens to the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah,
that's hard to just put your faith into it. But I really like Jalen Harrell. I really thought he was going to go a little bit higher than what he did, especially because of the leadership talk in the experience in a pro style offense that is similar to Mike Macdonald's defense. They kind of carried over a lot of the same stuff from when Mike Macdonald was the defensive coordinator in Michigan. So I really loved everything about Jalen Harrell, especially because he was athletic on top of that, good size, and everything. So I was just really surprised that he was still there in the 7th round. It's kind of like, how I feel, kind of like maybe the NFL. I think maybe what you were seeing is a 5th round talent or 4th round talent. If you want to get gutsy, I don't know if I put him in the 4th round, but I think a 5th round talent that was drafted in the 7th round, and 5th round talents do turn into something. So I think if he had been a guy that didn't have the leadership qualities and those intangibles and stuff like that, if he didn't have that kind of stuff, I'd be like, okay, I'm not buying into this hype. But I think I'm with you, Mike. I'm probably 6.5. I'll bump it up to 7 just because I want to be, I want him to succeed. So I'm just gonna, give him a little extra boost of confidence because I know he's listening to the show. So, that's kind of where I'm at. I just wanted to kind of talk about him because we haven't really talked about him even when we were discussing the edge group. So I just kind of want to talk about him. Let's preview the cornerbacks. And I really just have one question for you both. And it's a 2-parter. How do you rank this secondary, these cornerbacks, not including the safeties, these cornerbacks compared to Tennessee Titans of past and compared to NFL of current? I would say that this is, I have a hard time thinking of a better 1 through 3 punch as long as Cheeto is the starter. And even if you want to get to 4 with Jarvis Brown-Lee, I think that you would almost say that is the best secondary right there. Now that's putting a lot on, JBL there. And for the Tennessee Titans, I would say it's easily the best 1, 2, and 3. So Mike, I'll start with you. Where are you at?
I would say this is probably the best. It's the best at
and
least
it's all
going
on
back.
paper, by the way.
Yeah, I would say it's the best cornerback room going back to probably the early 2000s. Would be my statement there, because I think even the Malcolm Butler, Logan Ryan, Adoree Jackson group, I mean, there wasn't really an A player in that group like there is with L'Jarius Sneed. I think Sneed Butler would be the closest, but Snead is better than Butler was without question. And I think Cheeto is probably a pretty good approximation of Adoree from a skill set standpoint, or not from a, like, they're stylistically extremely different. But from a talent standpoint, I think they're similar. But then I think McCreary's also much better than Logan Ryan was, even though I was a Logan Ryan fan, am a Logan Ryan fan. I just think Roger McCreary's a better player, better cover man than Logan ever was. So I think it's better than that group. As far as where they rank in the NFL, I would say they're like probably somewhere in the top 5-ish for me. I think, the Jets, obviously, I would say are number 1, Browns maybe number 2. And then, if we want to talk about Dolphins, Cowboys, I guess that would be kind of my next group, but I don't know that I'd put either of those over Tennessee. So yeah, I'd say 3 or 4 probably would be my ranking for them.
Yeah. What about you, Stoney?
Yeah, I'm having trouble thinking of a Titans secondary that is as deep as this one. And again, like you said, on paper anyway. I mean, I don't know. Cortland Finnegan, Jason McCourty were a pretty good duo together. I don't recall who the third guy in that situation was. That was the unit that immediately came to mind for me after my man catch no ball. And I feel like this group is a little more dynamic, a little more multiple and versatile than that group was. So I think it probably is the deepest group that I can think of off the top of my head. And I'm right in line with Mike. I think this is a top 5 secondary on paper. And when you go 3 deep, I don't know that there are too many teams in the NFL that can go 3 deep matchup for matchup with this unit. So I like the Jets a lot. I'm glad, Mike, you said the Browns, because I think people sleep on how good that secondary is. I would add never mind, I'm not going to say it out loud.
No, you got to now.
No,
you have to now.
Listen, I think there's something cooking in the secondary in New England, and I'll leave it at that.
Now, Christian Gonzalez, I think, is a guy for sure.
I don't want somebody to pull my pants down because I said the Patriots were going to be good from that one little clip, but I think that's my sleeper pick. If you're looking for a secondary, a cornerback group that could emerge in 2024, I think it could be the Patriots.
That's not bad. I mean, they always tend to have a good cornerback defense, even during some of their lowest times. It's just about health with them.
And let me real quick before we move on. The corners from that early 2000s defense, I do think they're better because you got Samari Rolle and Denard Walker, who were like both really, really good corners. And then you also had Dane and Sidney with that group. And then even if you, I wasn't the biggest Perry Phoenix fan, but you had Perry Phoenix in that mix too. I think early in that 99-2000 kind of era. But Denard Walker and Samari Rolle, of course, that was before they played a ton of nickel and all that stuff too.
Yeah.
But Denard Walker and Samari Rolle is still the best duo for me in Titans history.
And I agree. I agree with that assessment. I just talking about that. Like Roger McCreary as your third just really bumps up the group so much over these other things. And
second,
if you're talking about just duos,
second.
Well, whatever. Or Cheeto, I guess, if you're third.
Yeah.
So the preseason game is this week. Yeah, we'll see the starters some, not a lot, but there are some position battles, that are interesting to watch. It is interesting to watch at this point what the punt returners do, what the kickoff returns look like. I mean, we talked about those battles anyway. I mean, the punt return battle list, just a week ago when I read it off, was like 9 players like we're trying out for punt returner. And I'm sure kick returner has probably some of those 9 players overlap with a few different names and all that kind of stuff. How do they deploy it? What do they think works? What doesn't work with the new kickoff rules? Something that I'm watching for with great interest. But other than that, I'm just kind of looking at what the rookies do and what the rotation of the rookies looks like. And that includes undrafted free agents, because I am interested to see what Bryce Oliver does. I think he's put together a nice little camp and he's got good size to him. but I need to see what else there is to him against another corner group that's not just 1v1s. I need to see what he does in a game.
And
this
he's
is a
also
good way
not
to-
making the roster.
Yeah, I mean, he may not be. I mean, you never
Practice
know.
squad. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, if he can't make the roster, Mason Kinsey's definitely not making the roster. So, but you know, I do look at what the offensive line does, but also it's really probably more about the offensive line depth at this point, and what does Radens do versus what Repsich does. You know, it's not really about. I'm not looking to see Tavondre Sweatin, who's probably only going to play like 10 snaps. He'll probably be treated like a vet. JC Latham will probably be treated like a vet, but I could see Radens and Repsich and maybe even Brunskill just continually being rotated either by series or whatever at that right guard spot. So that is something of interest to me to watch. Besides that, you can even pile on to that stuff if you want to. But Stoney, what are some interesting things that you are looking for at this stage of preseason, this first game?
I mean, for me, the big two are guys that we've talked about on this show because I think they could be a factor in positional races, and that's Andrew Repsich at right guard, and it's Jalen Harrell at edge. I think both of those guys could find themselves suddenly in the heat of a position battle that might mean something. Outside of that, there's, guys that I haven't heard a whole lot about throughout the summer that I kind of want to see where they're at and why things have been so quiet. Isaiah Eaton comes to mind, defensive lineman. Really like the traits there, really like the build, think he could potentially play a contributing role. Gabe Jeudy-Lally, it sounds like, has kind of gone cold from the media trail. Haven't heard a whole lot about him. Want to see how he does. And then the safety that I don't feel like anybody has talked about, Keaton Ellis out of Penn State. I figure those guys are probably going to get some significant playing time on Saturday, and I want to see if there's anything to latch onto, anything that might warrant an expanded look there. But it's the guys like that on the back end of the roster that are going to be fighting for one of those spots here in a couple of weeks that I think are going to be playing the hardest and that we can probably get the most juice out of when we're evaluating this game.
Mike, what about you?
Yeah, I'm interested. I mean, the 49ers have already said they're not going to play their starters. So it's going to be, backups for them against the Titans starters who, apparently are going to play. So I am excited to see whatever little we see of JC Latham, of Tavondre Sweat. I'm going to be excited to see what those guys look like in game day uniforms out there, mixing it up, even if it's against 49ers backups or whatever. I'll be excited to see that. But then I think Stoney hit on several of the ones that I'm excited about. But I'll also add Jarvis Brownlee. I'm excited just to see him in action for a big sample size in a game setting, what that looks like. I'm excited to see Matthew Jackson, see if some of the playmaking that he's shown in camp can stick. And then I'm also, the whole offensive line mix. How much do those because even if they pull the starters, right, I still kind of feel like there's starters and then there's the guys like Nicholas Petit-Frere, Dylan Radens, Andrew Repsich, John Ojukwu that are in battles that I think those guys may linger in the game a little bit longer than the rest of the starters. And I'm interested to see how all those guys fare. And then I kind of want to see like Jaquan Jackson, are we seeing anything from him? I'm very concerned about his.
I've seen him get manhandled.
Yeah, I'm concerned about his spot on the roster. I think I'm leaning towards him not making it at this point.
Well, if you are a conspiracy theorist for depth charts, Kyle Phillips is way ahead of most of the other. He's the backup Tyler Boyd right now. So
right, but then the question becomes: do you keep the punt returner or do you keep the other guy, or do you
keep
seven?
the guy good at wide receiver that matters more? Or do you get?
Right.
Can you not just get a guy out there to fair catch it?
Right. That's the question. But yeah, can we see some Jalen Harrell, some Thomas Rush? Is there anybody in this edge group worth a damn that can play?
I want to say something. I'm going to throw this out there to you guys. Okay, so I'm looking at the 49ers depth chart. We know we're not going to see Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings. We're not going to see Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brindle, John Feliciano, Colton McKivitz, George Kittle, Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, and Kyle Juszczyk. Okay, that's a great. This second string offense is nothing to put your nose up to. And we're talking Ronnie Bell, Ricky Pearsall, if he's able to be cleared to play, because I know he's had some injury issues. Jacob Cowing. You still have Chris Conley and Danny Gray behind them and Trent Taylor behind them. Jalen Moore, Spencer Buford, Ben Parch, Dominic Puny, and Chris Hubbard are a acceptable, pretty good preseason offensive line group to test your edge groups, your defensive line, your corners. And then you have Logan Thomas as tight end 2 over there. Joshua Dobbs is their quarterback. And Elijah Mitchell's their backup running back. I'm just saying the defense that we're going to see, I think, a good test for what the defense has done in practice, because obviously, your Jeffrey Simmons isn't going to play, your Tavondre Sweat's not going to play, but like these guys that we talked about, like Jalen Harrell, guys that need to step up like Cedric Gray, guys like Jarvis Brownlee Jr., like the rookies, and some of these guys that are kind of lingering around like Trey Avery and Matthew Jackson. This is actually a pretty good offense. I mean, a pretty good preseason offense for your second string defense to see who is kind of almost legit. It's a good barometer test. Like, I didn't even think it was going to be this good of a list when I read it out. But if you're talking about seeing, like, it's so hard sometimes when we watch defense versus offense or offense versus defense, is like, well, Malik Willis was able to do this, or Mekhi Sargent was able to do this, and then you're kind of looking at who was on the field when he did it. It's just like, yeah, I can't really read too much into it. But for this defense, I don't think the backup defense for this team is not that great, but the backup offense is pretty good, and I kind of think that we're going to see a lot of truth or lie come out of this Tennessee Titans defense, of these backups to back end of this roster, and maybe get a little bit of clarity on what's for real and what's not for real. Stoney, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like it a lot. And specifically this offensive line matchup, Spencer Burford started some game for San Francisco over the last couple of years. Saw him at the Senior Bowl a couple of years ago. He's a stout player. And I think my favorite pick in the entire 24 draft might have been Dominic Puny, landing in San Francisco. I think he's going to get some reps. I'd love to see him crack the starting 5 by the season's opener. So they're not going to be going up against scrubs. And even if Ricky Pearsall doesn't play, I think Ronnie Bell's got some juice, and Danny Gray, injuries have kind of kept him from, I feel like, really hitting his stride, what he could be. But there's still some pieces there that I think are going to test what this defense can do from an edge rush perspective, from a space perspective. I think they're going to have to defend pretty fiercely against this offense. I think it's going to be a good barometer of where this team is at right here in early August as we kick the preseason off.
Like, Mike, we should be able to kind of have a good understanding of where this Tennessee Titans defense lies after Arden Key. Like, I feel like with Rashad Weaver, with, Jalen Harrell and Shane Ray, if they're kind of getting stonewalled by Chris Hubbard and, Jalen Moore, we may kind of know where the Tennessee Titans may need to dip into the free agency waters, or maybe even possibly the trade waters out there. Like, I kind of feel like we kind of see, were they right about this linebacker depth? Were they right about this edge group? Or at least we should know if they're turning in one direction or not, right?
Yeah, frankly, I don't think they think that the edge group is fine. When they're asked about it, they pretty consistently mention, that they're still looking for stuff, but I don't think that they like any of the options that are out. Well, Denard Wilson. I mean, they're not. No coordinator is ever going to say, "Well, no, these guys suck," and we need more help. But I don't think that they're necessarily satisfied. I think they aren't happy with the options that are out there, which I agree, especially if Carl Lawson's knee is radioactive or whatever, for whatever reason, he isn't being signed any of these places. It's very thin out there now with the whole edge rush group. So it will be interesting to see all that all shakes out. I'm also just interested to see how much glazing and guzzling is happening with Josh Dobbs from Vols fans during this preseason game. It is going to be obnoxious if he plays well. So I'm hoping Denard Wilson comes out and just destroys the Niners offense with some crazy preseason blitz packages. So
switching over to the offense, Stoney. I mean, we talked about Andrew Rupsich, Dylan Raines, and I think we've all kind of on the same page that some of these offensive line men that maybe are a little bit more tenured than others are going to see a lot. How much are you kind of interested to see what Cole Spencer brings to the table? He seemed to be a Bill Callahan, guy from the offseason, the interaction and stuff. But how interested are you to, look at it and say, hey, what can Cole Spencer do against, Uter Gross Matos or, some of these guys with Kevin Givens, Jordan Elliott, Drake Jackson? Like, where are you at? You laugh, but where are you at on some Cole Spencer? Like, are you not just a little bit interested?
No, I'm laughing because I was just sitting here. I jotted down on my notes. You can see Cole Spencer's name right there circled. I was thinking of ways to shoehorn Cole Spencer into our conversation because I am excited to watch him. And I think he's going to get some serious run on Saturday because I don't think Skoronski's going to play for very long. And it sounds like Spencer has been, I think he's on the depth chart at center. I didn't really pay attention much to it, but
correct.
It seemed like he was backing up Skoronski quite a bit throughout the summer so far. And I think he's a big athletic guy. I think he has some pretty good tape. I think he had draftable tape. I think he's a good undrafted free agent addition. I think he's going to get some run on Saturday. I don't know what they're going to do with him, if it's going to be at left guard or if he's going to play center in the game. I'll be excited to see how he's used, but I think he's a really intriguing developmental prospect. I don't think he's going to come in right away and be the answer at any of your offensive line positions, but I think this is a really talented player that has the potential to grow into something contributing role for this offensive line. And I'll be watching. And listen, I liked Uter Gross Matos. I don't know how to pronounce it. I liked him. I think that's another area we can point to and say these guys are going to have some pretty decent competition on Saturday.
Well, and it's also guys that kind of like these preseason games are good to maybe scout some potential cut candidates, maybe some trade possibilities. Sure. I mean, Travis Gibson was a guy who went off against the Tennessee Titans and then they turned around and signed him. Yeah. But I want to ask you a question, Mike. In the last few years, the Tennessee Titans backup battle for quarterback has been terrible and has hampered the viewing experience and enjoyment of the Tennessee Titans in the preseason. And it has also prevented you from getting a good idea of what some of these guys playing for roster spots like Thomas Adekoya, David Martin Robinson, Kearis Jackson, these guys that are on the team now, but think about the guys that we have missed out on kind of maybe figuring out who they are because the quarterback play has been sort of atrocious. And then you combine that with how bad the offensive line play was. You look at this and you got Mason Rudolph, probably going to play with a pretty good, maybe second string offensive line, but you got Mason Rudolph in there. Hassan Haskins is your running back. Thomas Adekoya, Nick Vannett will probably be your tight ends for the majority of maybe a second quarter or something. But when you're looking at this team, don't you think we'll get a better gauge, or do you think we'll get a better gauge of maybe some of these other players like, the Kyle Phillips? Of course, I don't know how they even get Kyle Phillips, Jaquan Jackson, Mason Kinsey time. I mean, are they going to do 3 wide receiver slot sets? Just have them stacked up all in a line behind them? But I mean, don't you think we'll get a better gauge of maybe these guys on offense that are fighting for a roster spot rather than like when we had to see Malik Willis and Racey McMath try to play football? Like, to me, this feels like a pretty good gauge. And if Malik Willis can maybe go back and play against the threes for another team and look competent, you should be able to see maybe some of the stuff that we have heard from in practice by these guys like David Martin Robinson or Bryce Oliver. Maybe we'll see a little bit of what they saw in Jaquan Jackson and maybe Jabari Small, because the quarterback play is probably better than what we've seen in the past few seasons.
Yeah, I definitely think there's something to that, because I think Mason Rudolph, and it sounds like he's having a good camp. Mason Rudolph is probably the best backup quarterback they've had in a while. I mean, obviously last year it's a little bit different situation with Levis and Tannehill, but as far as like a true backup heading into the season, like just a veteran backup type, I think Mason Rudolph is as good as they've had in a little while now. Really, I guess since they signed Tannehill. But it was it's certainly a better situation. I think Malik Willis, it sounds like, has made some strides. We'll see, like, what those strides look like. He looked okay last preseason, so I don't think he's going to be a disaster or anything like that by any means. I'm sure the Titans would love for him to look great. As obviously Rudolph, they'd love for him to look great too. So I think they're going to have a good chance to put on some passable preseason action here, but the question is going to be the offensive line, right? Like, I mean, we don't think the starters, are settled. When you pull the starters out, I think the underbelly of that offensive line could be kind of ugly, and it could hamper what we're going to see. And frankly, I'm a little excited just to see some more Hassan Haskins, some more Julius Chestnut, Jabari Small. Running backs always, I feel like, end up kind of being stars of the preseason because teams get in the second half and they're just running the ball to run the clock out.
It sounds like Hassan Haskins has suddenly gained juice, I guess, as the kids would say. Not steroids, but like he has more pep in his step. He's not the slow plodding running back anymore. So maybe unfortunately Braden will be right and Hassan Haskins can actually turn into a serviceable player for the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah.
But I think there's some interesting, for me, I think there's some interesting, I'm more interested in this preseason because I do think that there is a good litmus test for the defense. And I think the storylines are there on defense much more than there is on offense. But I am interested to see how the offense looks from a maybe personnel standpoint. It'll be very bland. But, how does the offense function with Mason Rudolph versus Malik Willis is a very good battle and storyline to kind of figure out what you got. And can Willis earn that third emergency quarterback spot that, can help the team if they're in some weird predicament? Or will that go to another player that maybe outshines him at a spot of need, like maybe Gabe Jeudy-Lally or a Matt Jackson who for all intent and purposes has had a great camp, but he keeps getting pushed down the depth chart. So like, I just think that there's a lot more story. This isn't the same boring preseason, and it's a preseason with a lot of storylines. So I'm very excited to watch it. And I hope we get some good insight on things as well. But as far as right now, I do think that when you look at it, you should be able to start seeing the trends, and whether the trends from preseason or from the offseason heading into this preseason game are the right trend, or are they truth or a lie? Because last year, the defensive line kept beating up on the offensive line, and they're doing that again. And then when you got into the preseason, you saw them getting done again. If this offensive line, for the limited reps it may see, if they hold up against this defense, well, maybe that's a little bit of a trend in the right direction. So to me, I'm looking for the trends because your play calling is going to be very bland. Your plays are going to be very bland because nobody's going to show their playbook, in a preseason game. But the unknown stuff with kickoff and punt return, there you go. That's where I'm very interested. But I am interested to see just the trends of the players and what we've heard from training camp. What's the one player that you think everybody will be talking about after the game, Mike?
Oh, Lord.
Let me rephrase my question. What's going to be the most overhyped player coming out of the game, Mike?
Kyle Phillips.
Kyle Phillips will be the most overhyped. Stoney, who will be the most overhyped player coming out?
Hassan Haskins.
Ooh, okay. Interesting. I'm going to say the most overhyped player is going to be Chance Campbell. That's who I think will be the most overhyped player. So we got a little bit different. Who will be the most under the radar player that nobody's talking about that we'll all be talking about on this show first, and everybody will have to catch up to us? Mike.
Keandre Coburn.
Ooh, I like it.
I'm I'm going to say it's finally going to come together for my boy Isaiah Eaton. I think he's going to get a lot of reps on Saturday, and people are going to be like, who the fuck is this guy? This is Thanos.
I think I'm going to be saying on Wednesday, we told you last week that it was a 50-50 split between Andrew Rupsich and Dylan Radins, and I hate to inform you that Andrew Rupsich is going to be your starting right guard.
He's winning the job.
Winning the job. Okay. But who will be the most deserving player, or who do you think, who is one player you are most excited to focus on this weekend, Mike?
Gosh, that's a tough question. I'll actually say like Cedric Gray, because I think he's going to play a lot. I think he's going to play a lot, and I just want to know, like, what's going on with that, right? Like, because we don't hear anything about him, which is not a great sign, but also linebacker plays really hard to watch at camp. So I don't know.
It's boring. It's a boring job. After having to do it at the Senior Bowl, it's a boring job.
It's boring, and it's hard to see, like, especially the way the Titans setup is, like, where you're on the field and you're trying to see the linebackers, and as soon as the ball snapped, it's just chaos and bodies in there, and you can't see anything. It's not like watching it on TV where you've got a good angle down on what's actually happening. It's impossible. So is Cedric Gray bad? Do we need to ring alarm bells with him, or is it just, he's a rookie linebacker that's still, the game's probably moving really fast for him at the moment? Or is he good? Does he make his move, here in a preseason game? Yeah. I'm interested to watch him.
Stoney, you kind of like got upset, and I did.
Well, that's who I was going to say.
Was going to be my answer. So
yeah, for the exact same reason.
Yeah. Second guy that you're most excited to watch.
I'll keep it within the position and say James Williams, because we've heard a lot about him throughout the last couple of weeks of training camp. But whereas, we've gotten the clips, we've gotten the crumbs, the little morsels of Jarvis Brownlee Jr., I haven't seen much of James Williams on my Twitter feed at all, but people are talking about him. There's rumblings. The way people talk, he might kill a guy on Saturday. I don't know. He's just running downhill and beating the shit out of people. So I'll be excited to finally get my eyes on that, and just watching how that linebacking duo, how they've progressed, because I do think these are two pieces that are kind of stash and develop guys that maybe we're gonna keep tabs on them as they grow into their roles, and maybe they're not going to be counted upon right now.
I don't know if I'm really maybe most excited is the right word for my guy, but I am going to be watching with a magnifying glass everything that Jaquan Jackson does, because he will forever be compared to Malik Washington in my eyes.
He's doing well.
He is the Des Fitzpatrick at this point to my Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I'm not saying that Malik Washington turns into Amon-Ra St. Brown, but at like every turn I'm like, draft Malik Washington. Then they draft Jaquan Jackson, and I want to see what they see. I am most excited, and again, I guess it is anticipatory over Jaquan Jackson. Like, I want to see what Tyke Tolbert saw at the Tulane Pro Day. I want to see what they saw at Senior Bowl, because I didn't see it at the Senior Bowl. So I want to see what Jaquan Jackson does, and just where is the speed? Where does is it the route running? Is it the speed? Is it strength? What is it, a combination of everything? He'll also probably return a few punts, maybe some kickoff returns. Like, I want to see what Jaquan Jackson does, because I'm also going to look and see what Malik Washington does, and I'm going to compare it every fucking time. And if I'm right, I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'll happily say I'm wrong. I've never shied away from it. But that's the guy I'm most looking forward to. That will do it for us. One more thing, Stoney.
Yeah, so talking about offensive coordinators potentially attacking this Titans defense, I think there was a vulnerability in the seam routes. The Titans don't have a lot of turn and run guys, so I think offensive coordinators could creatively gain matchups with athletic tight end, slot receiver on guys like Jack Gibbons, Jamal Adams, even Elijah Molden. But I think Quandre Diggs helps alleviate some of that.
That will do it for us. The three guys you will not find in the Titans' new mosh pit, because there is no way I want to go to a game and then have to stand around and be next to live music. No. I try to escape live music anywhere possible.
I'm with you, man.
and none of the bands they ever have are ever good. So I am out on the mosh pit, but I am glad that other people will be able to enjoy the mosh pit, and that is something cool for other people to enjoy. It's just not for me. But that will be at the new stadium. But for the tennis, for us, Football and Other F Words, for Mike, Stoney, and myself, Zach, you can follow Mike on Twitter at Mike Herndon NFL. Follow Stoney at Stoney Keeley, and me at F Words Pod. On behalf of Bluegrass Beverages, our sponsor, who are great, fantastic. We are so excited football is around. And to prepare for your football watching parties and ways, head over to Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Been in service for over 50 years, which is insane. But for all you guys, thank you for joining us. This has been Football and Other F Words, and you have just been effed.